Swiss democracy is a very exciting example of how democracy can combine direct and indirect means and can remain central to not only to the constitution but also to the psychology and the psyche of a nation. The problem with Switzerland is that the only reason why its financial and economic success is so prevalent is because nobody else can be like Switzerland. Switzerland is successful only because there are no other Switzerlands. So, which creates a problem for imagining ways of mapping Swiss democracy on other nations. But the constitution of Switzerland is a great example of how democracy can be made to work at a larger scale in a sophisticated world. Unless the basic income approach branches out into larger than Switzerland capitalist economies, the future of capitalism is going to be particularly bleak and indeed very uncertain. Capitalism cannot be saved, and it shouldn't be saved. It's a pretty nasty system. And in any case, it's the wonderful thing about capitalism is that it produces the technologies that will ensure the end of capitalism. Capitalism cannot survive the gadgets that it produces. But the question is what comes after that. The idea of segregating people between those who own the means of production but do not work them, and those who work them but do not own them, was always going to be transient. You can't have human society being founded on this segregation for very long. It has its limits. This social relation of production is going to end. But the question is what follows it. Is it a utopia or a dystopia? That is a major question. Well, if it does, it won't be capitalist. It will be post-capitalist. If it does, there will be a way by which the immense wealth that the new technologies can produce is shared, and it's shared beyond the private ownership of that machinery, of that capital. So it will be socialism, but not the way we knew it.
What about democratic socialism?
Well, I hope it is democratic, because if it isn't, then we're going to have the gulag again. And in any case, I don't believe that democracy is an add-on. It's not something that you graft upon a system. So you can have I don't believe you can have socialism without democracy. I don't believe you can have capitalism surviving without a democratic process. One of the reasons why Europe is in such a mess at the moment is because democracy has been taken out of the equation, and the result is a self-perpetuating deflationary crisis, which is undermining Europe. So what is exploitation? Exploitation is the lack of freedom to say no to a terrible deal that is offered you. So if you're starving and somebody offers you a job where you're working 20 hours a day, where you're being whipped, where you're being locked in the factory during the night, as it happens in places like Southeast Asia or India, if you're the only way of surviving, of helping your family survive, is by selling your children to a factory owner who uses them as bonded labor, then the decision to say yes to these deals is not an act of freedom. It's an act of slavery. It's an act of exploitation. The only thing that can stop exploitation is good options that allow you to say no. And then if you say yes, it means that this is not an exploitative choice. So if basic income provides you the floor to stand on, an outside option that allows you to say no to a terrible deal, it will be very difficult to find a silver bullet by which to kill off corruption. But come to think of it, the current systems of welfare we have, which predicate payments on particular means testing and bureaucratic processes, they give a lot of discretionary power to bureaucrats. When bureaucrats have discretionary power, you have a lot of room for corruption. So by simply handing it over to everyone, you're making the system far more efficient. You make it straightforward to administer, easier to administer, and you take away the discretionary power that reinforces corruption. Well, take an iPhone, open it up. What you'd find in it is technologies that were developed by the public purse. Collectively produced technologies like Wi-Fi that was produced by an Australian government grant, or every single technology in your iPhone or Samsung was produced publicly, but it was privately appropriated by the particular company that developed it further. So we need to rethink the process of wealth creation and distribution. The current dominant paradigm has it that wealth is produced privately, and then the state comes and appropriates part of it to redistribute it. This is a great illusion. It's a very toxic illusion. In reality, wealth is produced collectively and privately appropriated. So if basic income returns to the collective, part of the wealth that the collective has produced, then this is not only fair, but it is also efficient, because it allows for a replenishing and a reinvestment into the knowledge that produces the wealth in the first place. Like every wonderful tool, unconditional income can be a threat as well as a major help. In my negotiations, for instance, with the Troika of lenders last year, the lenders were insisting on unconditional income for Greeks. That sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Except they wanted a tiny, minuscule little unconditional income in exchange for getting rid of child benefit, disability benefit, all sorts of benefits that keep people alive now. So it's not just unconditional income that is necessary. It is the politics in which it is embedded that must be progressive, and it must be humanist, so that basic income can be part of the solution rather than part of the problem for Europe. Without utopia, the world simply doesn't move on. Everything that we take for granted today was either a heresy or a utopia some time ago. Think about it. The idea of flying, human beings defying gravity, that was both heretical and utopic. The idea of a world, of a society without slaves. When the first anti-slavery movement organizers got together, they had no evidence that it was possible to have a society without slaves. There had never been societies without slaves. That was a major utopia. Without these utopias, the world we live in today would be a terrible dystopia. Not take anything for granted. Keep criticizing, keep analyzing, keep understanding what's behind the phenomena, and act on the basis of logic and principle.